Welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. We are kicking off a new era of knowledge sharing with our move to video podcasts. Here, you will get to hear from experts in a more relaxed setup, diving deep into the nuts and bolts of deep tech and artificial intelligence. The shift to a more visual and flexible format means that you can now tune in whenever and wherever it suits you best, bringing the world of AI to life through the dynamic storytelling. Get ready for a lineup of fascinating talks on deep tech and AI seen through the lens of top minds across the ecosystem. Catch you on the next episodes of the AI Unplugged Without Borders. Today, the topic is about the insights of how executives can gain AI knowledge to lead transformations within their individual corporations. I'm honored to have sat with Gregory LaBlanc. He is a lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business, in addition to teaching in the Department of Economics and Management, Science and Engineering. He is also a distinguished teacher fellow at Berkeley Haas, Berkeley Law School, and the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at Berkeley as well. Greg also teaches classes in finance and law, innovation, strategy, technology, and data. He also is an instructor at HEC Paris, where he teaches the digital transformation class for both executive MBAs and executive education in general. He has advised numerous startup companies, particularly in fintech, AI, and people operations. His research lies at the intersection of law, innovation, and the use of data in rapidly changing industries. An interesting combination. So Greg covers a wide range of topics in executive education, from digital transformation, including transformation itself, data strategy, fintech, blockchain, and financial innovation and innovation ecosystems, data-driven decisions, marketing creativity and design thinking, venture finance, and strategy leadership. It's a long, long list of expertise. Now, Greg has an impressive list of companies that he has worked for over the years, from global technology companies, including financial institutions, industrial retail and services companies, government agencies, and on the big list that I stopped counting at over 200, he literally has worked with all the who is who in all these respected industries. Now, having said that, I am your host, Thomas Neubert. I am born and raised in Germany. I have been a long-time entrepreneur and living in Silicon Valley for over 33 years. And I am also the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Greg, good to see you. Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me at this very beautiful Berkeley campus. You can see a little bit of the Bay Area in the background. So we are here in Berkeley on the other side of the Bay in San Francisco Bay Area. And thanks again for taking the time. You always have been a gracious supporter of the Transatlantic AI Exchange initiative. I really appreciate that. And today I want to talk a little bit about your very rich background and passion about artificial intelligence, and particularly what you teach at Berkeley Haas and Stanford about managers, corporate executives. How do they deal with the whole topic? What is your learning? What's your takeaway? What are the classes and what are the suggestions that you have for hopefully some of the audiences, being corporations and executives, are listening to it? So, and what do you do on a daily basis? What do you teach?
Well, I've always been interested in the economics of information and the economics of organizations, and how information changes the way organizations function.
Yeah.
And of course, we've seen such huge changes in terms of the amount of information, the type of information, the speed with which the information is collected and needs to be acted on, that this has had a profound impact on how organizations are structured and how they're managed. And so that's been the area that I've been interested in, and I've done it through studying finance, management, accounting, operations, marketing. Pretty much every aspect of business education is impacted by these huge trends.
Good. If you look at all these areas, do they have something in common, or do you need to know all of them to have a good idea or suggestion how you tackle AI? I mean, there are other technologies that were invented before, but I don't think anything has been so fundamentally changing the world and the landscape for all of us than AI.
Well, I'm not sure that you need to really understand AI at a deep level in order to know what is going to happen to your organization and what you need to know in order to incorporate it. If you go back to the early 20th century, right, every manufacturer had to figure out a way to incorporate electricity into what they did. But did they need to know the difference between AC and DC? Did they need to understand, what a ohm was, or what a volt was? Probably not. And so I don't think that a typical manager needs to understand what's going on under the hood. But they do need to understand what the possibilities are and what the limitations are. And they need to have some sense of how they can start to bake it in to pretty much everything that they do.
When you teach classes, is it primarily to students who are in some kind of a master or postdoc program, or is it also workshops within corporations?
It's about 50-50. So I spend about half my time with MBA students, graduate level students, sometimes engineering students, sometimes law students. And then I spend the other half of the time with corporations. And I should say that most of my MBA students are also working professionals. So you can see how they're impacted in real time. They can come into class on a Tuesday and they will have seen something since the previous Tuesday, and that becomes a topic of conversation in the class.
And when you teach them, what is different teaching them versus you go into a corporation, they hire you for them to better understand what in the world is AI and how do I put it into my corporation? I assume you give them kind of a workflow or something?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a big difference between what educators do and what consultants do. So a consultant is going to spend a lot of time with the company, and they're going to draw up some kind of roadmap. They're going to offer a scheme that the company can adopt to reorganize their departments and figure out their workflow. What an educator does is to come in and kind of reset the frameworks that people use, to maybe spend some time stopping and reflecting on what's going to happen, and then reorienting their ways of thinking about every aspect of their business. And so it sort of operates at a higher level than what, say, a consultant might do.
So give the audience an example. What's the message that you give to an executive who's sitting in front of you right now?
So the key message that I try to make clear in all my presentations is that technology is not something that you can kind of bolt on to your company, right? If your company has been optimized for a particular technological environment, and then you have a new technology that comes along, if you try to just sort of, bolt it on or smear it on top or, put a wrapper around it, it's usually going to be a waste of effort, a waste of time, and a waste of resources. Okay. And so you have to re-architect your organization so that the new technology can actually make a difference, so you can actually monetize it, so you can get a positive ROI on it.
So if I would hire you, so I assume it's a loaded question, but do you see yourself as a consultant or an educator?
Educator.
No consulting at all.
I don't think of myself as a consultant, even though I am kind of consulting.
Yes.
But the consulting that I think I do is to get people to ask the right questions, right? And to give them maybe some seeds, which will then grow into fully fledged answers that they can implement in their company.
So if I'm a mid-sized company and I don't have the resources like, a Google has or a Siemens or whatever, but I do know that I need to do something with AI. I need to look into the adoption, the implementation of it. why would I hire you? What is the main message that I would expect from you to help my managers to get to the right mindset? And then I guess I hire a consultant afterwards. Or how would you suggest that to a mid-sized company?
I didn't know I was going to have to go into sales mode with you, Thomas, right? But I think, look, people, when you go to business school, typically you think you're acquiring a bunch of skills that you're going to be able to amortize for 20, 30, 40 years, right? And if you go to engineering school, oftentimes you think you're getting a bunch of skills that you can amortize. And oftentimes we, get some training on the job, and we hope that we can amortize this stuff for a fairly long period of time. We're in a world now where you can't amortize it over a long period of time. You have to cultivate higher level ways of thinking that enable you to continuously learn, right? So part of what I try to do with the workshops and the seminars that I do with corporates is to start exposing them to these new ways of management, new ways of organizing, and the new tech, to get them to ask questions about what they're currently doing and how they're doing it, to do something like an internal audit at a high level to figure out whether or not the organizations, processes, and the people that they have in place are ready for these changes.
You gave an online session at the Transatlantic AI Exchange very early on, like a year and a half ago. And I will always remember this, the example that you gave. I think it was the movie Moneyball or something. Yeah. And that was that stuck in my head because it completely simplified what AI really is in comparison to, normal stuff that we are very familiar with in life. I think by now people got a little bit more educated since ChatGPT, and everybody now finally talks about it. But just in general, looking at the audience right now, for the people who are not familiar yet with the topic, how would you explain to somebody in very layman terms what AI is fundamentally?
Well, first of all, we've been talking about AI for a really long time. A lot of people, when I hear people say, "Oh, AI has finally arrived," I'm thinking, wait a second. We've had AI in some way, shape, or form for a pretty long time. I mean, Herb Simon was talking about AI back in the 1950s. So each new wave is a new form of AI. And we went from sort of expert systems to basic machine learning to deep learning and neural nets. And now we've got generative AI. And each one is, I think, a transformative innovation. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we are trying to take what it is that humans are good at and automate a lot of it, right? Take what humans are good at, which we think of as intelligence, and make it easier, make it automated, make it so that we can then move on to the next level. So the way I think about the current wave of generative AI is it's kind of like us outsourcing intelligence at a very high level. So we've outsourced compute, we've outsourced storage, we've outsourced all sorts of aspects of decision making, and these things are now available kind of as a service. You can plug in and get your compute. You can plug in and get your storage, right, from AWS. And what we'll have is a way to kind of plug in and get intelligence, right? And if we can do that, then we can spend more time pushing the boundary. Another way to think about it, I used to teach finance for many years, and what we saw over the last 50 years is kind of the rise of passive investing, right? So you used to have hundreds or thousands of investors, all of whom were chasing after alpha. They're all trying to figure out, right, how to beat the market. And then someone came along and said, well, look at this. If we just automate our investing, right? If we just buy the market bundle, the portfolio, then we can beat most of these people who are running around actively trying to pursue alpha. Okay. And so all of a sudden you saw this massive influx of investment into these passive strategies. Now, did this eliminate active investing? Did this make active investing a complete waste of time? Well, ask Ken Griffin, right? I mean, ask Simons at Renaissance technologies, I mean, we have these active investors who are making huge amounts of money, right? But they're not doing the kinds of things that the active investors were doing back in the 1950s and 60s. So I think that as we start to automate more and more, including a lot of the stuff that is now uniquely human, a lot of the creative things, this is just going to push the envelope to a next level where the creative people are going to have to do things that are even more interesting and even more complex, and it's going to create a whole new generation of Jim Simons and Ken Griffins who are going to be doing human-like things at an extreme level.
That's an interesting observation, because most of the people who are not too familiar yet with AI, the first reaction is fear. I think it's fear because of the unknown.
Yeah.
But it's also with, the movie industry and the media, and it's all the job will be killed, literally. The movie industry, they had their issues over the summertime with AI and the regulations, rightly so. But in general, based on what you just said, would you agree that AI will mainly eliminate basic functions that are there to be eliminated, or to streamlined, I should say, because I don't like the word eliminating or killing something, because everybody who has a certain expertise, it's not that we all will be eliminated. It's just that whatever can be automated, mainly the boring stuff, so to speak, that's fine. So we get more challenged in regards to creativity and use our intuition on top of what AI can do for us. So it's more something for us, with us, rather than against us, and everything will be eliminated. Would you agree with that?
People talk about elimination like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we eliminated smallpox. That's a pretty good thing. We eliminated child labor. Like, that's a pretty good thing. We eliminated hand washing of dishes for the most part in America. I mean, I spent a big chunk of my life without a dishwasher, and I can tell you, having a dishwasher is a lot better. Yeah. And I eliminated the need to wash my dishes by hand, and I don't miss it. So I don't think that we should be talking about elimination in a pejorative way. Of course, we're going to eliminate a lot of stuff. We're going to eliminate a lot of tedium. We're going to eliminate a lot of drudge work. We're going to eliminate a lot of the stuff that is frankly expensive and costly. Yeah. I mean, we have now about 3% of our labor force in agriculture. And this used to be 70, 80, 90%, right? Our ancestors, you don't have to go back far to find the vast majority of your ancestors engaged in agriculture. And there were people that were worried that these jobs are going to get lost. And my view is good riddance. Then we had the satanic mills, as Engels called them. And when we introduced automation into the textile mills, everyone was concerned that these jobs are going to get lost. Well, I think good riddance, right? I also worked in a factory, right? A clothing factory when I was young. Good idea. Let's get rid of those jobs. As far as I'm concerned, right? Anything we can do to automate and amplify what it is that we do is a good thing. So I'm not concerned one bit about there being a lack of things for us to do.
And all these things you just mentioned, they have changed the world for the better.
Yeah.
Right? They have made us to work less physically, but then focus more on the intellect of the human beings and other activities. So if you apply now AI, I remember when I drove you from Stanford to this other session, you had some very cool, interesting examples about AI in the artwork, in the movie industry, stuff that can be done today with generative AI, or maybe today in like small steps. But you said it will catch up so fast, and the no-code wave and stuff like that. Can you explore that a little bit for our audience?
Let's backtrack a bit and think about accounting. Right. So if you went to school to study accounting in the 1920s, what you did was you added numbers. So they would hand you a gigantic stack of pages from the phone book in New York City, and they would say, add up all the phone numbers. And you would just do this all day. And when you got to the point where you could add up 10 pages in less than 5 minutes with a 99.9% accuracy, they anointed you accountant, right? Yes. And then all of a sudden, the calculator came along, And did the accountants disappear, or did the accountants try to figure out ways to get you that tax break through accelerated depreciation or whatever? Okay. So when we look at the kinds of tasks that are, I mean, there's a very small subset of the tasks that will be enabled by something like generative AI. But if you think about, I want to do a short video to promote my new product. What do I have to do? Right? I have to hire someone who is a filmmaker. The filmmaker is going to have to set up a scene. They're going to have to bring in actors, and they're going to have to get the lighting just right. They're going to have to get the sound just right. And they're going to have to make sure that there is a key grip and a person with the background, and then all sorts of bad things can happen. And then they're going to create a little story, and they're going to create a text, and they're going to give the text to the actors, and they're going to have them do all this stuff. And then once that is in the can, they then show it to the client. The client looks at it and says, I don't like the looks of that guy. Give me a different guy. And then what? You got to start the whole ball rolling again, which could take another 6 months. Yeah. Now, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to just do text to video. We already have this in place. Say, give me a short video of a guy looking at this new product and have them say a few words about X, Y, Z. And then you do that, and you do it a couple more times, and you spin up a bunch of versions. You get one you think looks good. You show it to the client. The client says, I don't like this. I want this person to be sexier. You go back and you adjust the sexier dial, and you've got a new version. Okay? And so the amount of output that you can produce as a filmmaker is going to be exponentially bigger. And if you think about the job of the filmmaker, think of all that scheduling, and think of all that booking, and think of all the equipment that you have to maintain, and all of the relationships you have to have with all of these very difficult people, actors and so forth. You can get rid of all that. Now, when you're generating this, it's going to be drawn from all of this training data, right? And that's where the new battles are going to be. They're all going to be over who has access to what training data. Now, if you go back to my metaphor about active versus passive, if all of these models are trained on the same training data, then if you have 10 different filmmakers trying to spin up something with the same prompts, you're going to get 10 different versions. They're going to be very similar to one another, right? You're going to see, and a lot of the research in this field have shown that, the dispersion of outcomes tends to get reduced. And so that's going to open up the door for people, these so-called activist investors, the true creatives, to do things that that would not normally be imagined by what the algorithm has access to, which is the scope, the corpus of training data. So I think we'll see a new level of creativity, which will exist on top of these algorithms, which themselves, while fascinating in their creativity, will also be limited in their creativity.
So if I consider myself a creative videographer, for example, I should definitely embrace AI, not to eliminate myself, but to take the baseline work and streamline it completely, which for me is actually more cost effective anyway, and more satisfaction because I can focus on the creative part and have the production part streamlined by AI, one form or the other.
That's correct. So to give you another example, and this is an example I borrowed from my former student and friend Arvind Ravishankar. He talks about how if you have a light bulb burning in the ceiling, this thing will use up, I forget, 10 watts over the course of a 24-hour period or something like that. I don't know. I don't know anything about electricity. I just know how to use it. But anyway, whatever that quantity of electricity is, there's a certain amount of energy that went into lighting that. If we go back to the Babylonian times, if you wanted that much illumination, you would probably have to work for a couple months in the field to get enough sesame oil that you could burn that for, a couple hours, right? So you're basically taking thousands and thousands and thousands of labor hours and converting it into light. Now, if you want to have a light bulb right, on your ceiling. How long do you have to work at minimum wage? 5 minutes at minimum wage? I mean,
even less. These things are so cheap.
So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at, where the amount of labor that you're going to have to put into a lot of these pursuits just gets compressed down to such a tiny bit. Now, I know people like John Maynard Keynes said that at one point, all this new technology will make it so that nobody has to work. You've got current technophobes who are saying no one will get to work. So it's like, the techno-optimists say that no one will have to work, and the technophobes will say no one will get to work. But I've never seen in history a situation where the increase in labor productivity led to people with nothing to do. As far as I know, if I could compress everything I do down to a single second, I have a long list of things
you want to do
that I want to do with all that time that will be freed up.
Yeah.
And so I think that we're entering into an era where we're going to see the kind of productivity gains that we haven't seen in decades. And furthermore, in spite of the archaic way that we measure productivity, this will be so overwhelming that even the archaic metrics of productivity gain will have to stand up and notice.
So within universities right now, if I'm a student, what do you as a university entity teach me more? Is it more the deep machine learning and AI programming, or is it more the overall economics, finance or something? Or does it has to be both? Because in the future, one cannot live without the other. And if I want to be a good developer, I need to understand the other side, or I need to understand the other side because AI and the no-code wave that is coming doesn't even require developers anymore. At least that's the current rumors, that even the developers, which we are needing like over 2 million right now for AI, we may not need them because no-code is taking over so fast. Who knows what happens within a year or two? Is that true?
Well, first of all, I have a former colleague who used to say that if you want to run a 19th century railroad, get an MBA in the 20th century. And I think you could say that if you want to run a 20th century consumer products group company, then come to get an MBA in the 21st century. Now, I think some business schools do it better than others. I think at Berkeley and Stanford, we do a better job than most business schools of preparing people for 21st century business. But that said, I don't think that as an MBA, say, you really have to have a deep knowledge of, say, coding. And going forward, it's not clear whether, if you're an engineer, you really need to have a deep knowledge of coding. And that's because, just like every other creative field, we're moving to a world where you can automate the code generation process.
Yeah.
So just like we have, right, text to text, text to image, text to video, we'll have text to code. So I don't know what the number is, but a substantial percentage of the code that's on GitHub now is generated automatically, right? And so I think we'll get to a point where anybody will be able to spin up an app, spin up some functionality, spin up some code without any knowledge of a coding language, right? Just like if you want to search for something on Google, you don't need to understand. I mean, you don't even need to understand Boolean search, right? You just type in whatever and you get something. So I don't think that coding, I used to think in this, I advised a startup whose hypothesis was that the software engineer is the factory worker of the future and that we were going to need millions of these. I'm not so sure. I think that there will be software engineers that will be creating new things, but the vast bulk of the code is going to be automatically generated. Okay. And, maybe with some prompts, but maybe not even. In other words, maybe what'll happen is a system will detect a problem and it will self-repair, right? It'll know, oh, we're starting to get these dysfunctional results. Let's go back in and fix the code so that we don't get these dysfunctional results. And so if the objective functions are articulated well enough And that's really what the coder's job is. But that coder is going to have a deep understanding of the business in order to be able to spell out those objective functions, those cost functions, and so forth. So I really think that we're heading to a world where the kind of STEM knowledge that we're emphasizing now may not be as important as we think.
Yeah. That brings me to two questions. The first one towards students, the other one towards corporate executives. To prepare the students of today for the workforce in the future, what would you recommend them to look into in general when it comes to AI versus non-AI versus the economical business side, or go more vertical into a certain sector, or be a generalist and then let the AI just do the rest?
Well, I think you have to be able to do something better than anyone else on the planet if you want to be super successful. Okay, I don't think that's always been the case. Right? There has to be something that makes you unique. You have to have a moat around you, right? That said, I think that students tend to underinvest in the general skills, and they tend to move too quickly into some kind of specialized skills. And I think this is true in every profession. I think it's true in medicine. I think it's true in law. I think it's true in business. I think it's true in engineering. I think there is a high ROI to developing critical thinking skills, understanding how to evaluate information, understanding how to evaluate arguments, understanding how to come up with persuasive arguments, understanding how to come up with good stories and narratives. I mean, if I were to describe my job, I'm a storyteller. I try to find a bunch of stories that are so compelling that you can't forget them. So 20 years later, if I run into you, you'll remember the story, because the way in which we navigate the world is we have these frameworks, we have these stories, we have these models, we have these arguments, and we carry them around with us. And all we're doing is rearranging them, stacking them, breaking them down, and shuffling them. Right. So we have sort of a mental DNA, I don't know. We need a new word for it, right? But we're carrying around all of this mental DNA, and if we have the structure that allows us to replicate it and to build it out and to have it evolve and mutate, if we have that in place, then we can continuously change the particular shape that our specialization takes.
Okay. And then the second question is around the corporate executives. What do they need to do today to believe, well, how can I rephrase that? Let's assume they believe that they cannot just live without AI. They need to embrace it one way or the other. What do you recommend to them, kind of a step 1, step 2, step 3, where it needs to come, the message needs to come from the top down, but they need to be educated first. They can hire a consultant afterwards for the implementation. But what advice would you give to them how to start the process? Like, I have a company A, I have a finance department, I have AR, I have social media department, marketing, I have product management, whatever I may have. Where do they start? Do they start generally like a little bit of everything? Or would you say start with one division or bring a tiger team together? Yeah. What would you suggest?
So I think a lot of people believe that you need to have some person at the center that's a conductor, that's orchestrating all of these AI initiatives. And there is a logic to having some coordination, at least in the sense that you want to make sure that the architecture of your business allows for the free flow of information and easy access to resources when you need them. But I think that for many of these problems, companies are going to begin their AI journey in a decentralized way, because individual decision makers who are close to the problems will be able to identify the ways in which they can start to tap into
in different
AI. Absolutely. And we saw the same thing happen with other IT adoptions, right? Where you have sort of a shadow IT department for marketing and a shadow IT department for human resources. and so forth. Now, is that ideal? Probably not, right? It leads to technical debt and other sorts of things, but it's a little bit more realistic because these are the people who know the problems. They know the problems that they're faced with, and they can identify the ways that they can start bringing in these new tools to either reduce their costs, increase their revenue, right? Increase their customer base, like lower their churn or whatever. So I think that's the way you got to start. I mean, if we think back to the IT departments in the early 2000s, when I came here to Berkeley, the IT department wouldn't even support Apple products. Mm-hmm. And ultimately what happened is all the students, all the faculty, all the staff just started buying Apple products. Yeah. And you get to a point where the IT department they have to do it. And so that, bring your own device. I think we're going to see a lot of that happening at a lot of companies, right? Now, that's not to say that if you're a visionary, if you're a leader in the company, does this mean you don't have to rethink your business completely, what it is that you do, what it is that you have that no one else has, right? Is it that you own certain customer relations? Is it that you have certain proprietary data streams? And understanding the things that will survive, looking forward and saying 20 years from now, these are the parts of the business that are most likely to survive. Yeah. Okay. Now, I wouldn't necessarily bet on them because if your plan is too rigid, it's no doubt going to fail. But you do need to have some people in the organization who are looking far enough into the future to understand that they're not going to be doing the same thing. The boundaries of the firm are not going to be different, and the employee base is not going to be the same.
Agree. Okay. So almost done. Thank you very much. Maybe one last comment. We all experienced, as you said, AI has been around for a while. The term has been around since the 50s, and then there was machine learning, neural networks, and so on. But everybody now has seen the ChatGPT moment like a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. It's almost like in the late 90s, we had that Mosaic Netscape browser window open to the internet. It's almost the same. And we had a lot of hype this year, and I saw maybe too many startup companies coming out of the woodworks. Generative AI flavor number 15 of something that, I've seen 14 times before. What's your prediction for the next 12 to 24 months where this is now heading? Are we coming down? And it's like in the old days, we had 15 flavors of pets.com and only we needed one. Or is there something new actually that is more mature that people actually now need to spend a little bit more attention to, either on the applied AI side or on the generative AI side, but a little bit more mature?
Well, look, building out a foundation model is expensive. It requires an enormous amount of data. So you're not going to see every company creating their own foundation model from scratch. And so, right? So everybody's going to want to be able to tap into it in the same way that they can tap into AWS for their storage and compute, right? Or they can tap into Google for their search. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a couple of these competing models that, and who knows how many. I don't have any reason to think that it's going to be a winner-take-all space like Google was. But if we have a bunch of these different competing models, then what companies will do is they'll plug into it. Mm-hmm. And then they'll add a layer on top. You can think of it as like an app layer on top. And that app layer will have certain functionalities, but it will also have extra data. It'll have its own proprietary data that it will use to supplement the insights that you get from this broad, right, corpus of data that is used to spin up what we might think of as the generic version. Yeah. Right? And then as those companies start to collect more and more data and then get that human feedback that helps to shape it and give it better value going forward, that's how these new businesses are going to build out. So I'm fascinated by the industrial organization of this new space and how these new layers of functionalities will be built on top. Now, what that means is the value of data is just going to get greater and greater and greater. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm a company that has access to this massive inventory of music, let's say, right, I'm Universal, I have tons and tons of music. Well, I can generate music that is based on my collection of music. And if my music is in the public domain, then anybody else can. And so if there isn't a mechanism whereby I can charge a licensing fee for that, then I'm going to basically deny people access to this. And so what we might get is a refragmentation of the internet, so that right now Wikipedia is public, and so OpenAI might have a wonderful model that's built on Wikipedia, but then it no longer has access to Reuters, or it no longer has access to the Wall Street Journal data or Financial Times data, right? And so it's going to then start to skew its product because it doesn't have access to all of these other. Exactly. Now, on the flip side, just like there are going to be some entities that want to pull their data out from the training data that's used by some of these companies, there's going to be others that are going to want to push it in. So if I'm an academic institution and all of my research is sitting behind a paywall, right, as is so many academic journals and so forth, well, I might want to get rid of that paywall because I want this knowledge to get out into the broader public. And so there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made about the proprietary nature of your data, whether you want it to be part of these databases or whether you want to pull them out so you can develop your own, right, proprietary algorithms. That's where I see a lot of the super.
So the best is yet to come.
Yes.
After the last 12 months of a hype.
Hey, if I automate everything I'm doing now, I'm going to use all of that new time to just study this whole space and start to understand better where I think these trends are going.
Agree. And with that, we close this session. Greg, I want to thank you very much. As always, appreciate your time, your insights. And let's do this again in a couple of months and see what else you have to share for the world.
Okay, let's do it.
Thank you very much.